Hello and welcome back to El Partido, yet another Spanish football podcast. But for this week, no nostalgic twist because we are looking to try something slightly different. This is the pilot, so to speak, where we want to have a little deep dive into modern football, modern Spanish football, and what's been happening throughout the week, just to see if there's an appetite for something like this from ourselves, bit of critical thinking, bit of an analysis, and just to bring you those stories. So we would love to hear your feedback on this. If you've enjoyed it, if you think, lads, this isn't for you, go back to talking about Fernando Morientes, do let us know. But we thought we'd try something different with maybe the idea we could roll this out for next season. And joining me on this pilot and on this new mission, as always, is my co-host, Paul. Paul, how are we getting on?
Doing very well, Nick. I'm delighted to be here. As you say, I'm interested in trying this. You know, this is something that I think we wanted to give it a go to see if it works for us and if it works for the listener. Because it's, you know, we want to see additional content coming out on our channels, don't we, over the next season and the future looking forward. So we thought we'd give this a go as well. I mean, I speak from the background where, you know, anybody who is familiar with some of my previous work, I was predominantly current affairs related for Spanish football in the days where I was writing pretty much all day, every day. I delivered the breaking news, obviously, of CF Reyes and had the exclusive interviews with the American owners of the club, and was the only English speaking journalist to be able to cover that story in any depth. So breaking news is something that, you know, we're keen on. We're not quite doing that the same here, are we? We're just talking about current affairs, giving our views on it in a way that we think there's a bit of a gap in terms of the Spanish football market, but obviously we're not doing it for any reason other than we just want to try and put out some more content, and we think, listen, this is another thing that we could do because it's something we're passionate about, and we want to try it for this week, and we want to hear what everybody else makes of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, I think it's a good opportunity for us to spread our wings, so to speak, which is always a good one. But don't fear, ladies and gentlemen, the nostalgia will always be part of this podcast, and it will return this week as well. Paul's done an excellent deep dive on Unai Emery and his time with Almeria, so keep your eye out for that episode as well. But for now, focusing on this week, it has been absolute chaos in the corridors of the Santiago Bernabeu, and it all started last week with fights between football players, stories leaking out of the dressing room, and that has poured upstairs to this really, really bizarre scenario, hasn't it, Paul, where Florentino Perez, the president, the long-term president of Real Madrid, has a 2-hour buffer before he calls a emergency press conference, and we're all thinking, what could this be about? Is it to address what's been happening off the pitch? Is it to reset the relation after Barcelona won the title in El Clasico, where Real Madrid, were really, really poor? Or is this about potentially the special one returning to the Santiago Bernabeu, as it's highly rumoured he'll be returning? I don't think anyone expected to hear what we got out of this press conference, did we?
No, not at all. It was, in a period of already quite dramatic and explosive moments involving Real Madrid over the last few weeks, as you mentioned there, with scuffles behind the scenes and things such as that, and various Instagram stories and denials and rebuttals in the press, etc. This was just, you'd think it'd be par for the course, but it's just so bizarre. I mean, obviously, we're referring to this 12th of May press conference from Florentino Perez. I mean, I'll be honest with you, it's quite interesting that he would go out of his way to deliver such a hodgepodge of, almost incendiary statements. Yeah. He was swiping left, right, and centre really at people, wasn't he? I mean, any kind of press conference that contains the line "I regret to inform you, but I am not resigning," is it's always going to be interesting, isn't it? But it kind of what was he? What sort of reaction? I mean, obviously we're here to unpack it. What sort of reaction was Perez expecting? Was this sort of him thinking, if I come out and make a statement, then it might put a lid on some of the other in-house issues we've got? Is it, as he said he was, where he was trying to correct some false statements that were circulating over recent months about his personal health and things like that? Or is it a culmination of 2 seasons, then now onto the third manager with another one to be appointed imminently, and 0 trophies, which at Real Madrid is it gets people talking, doesn't it? And did he believe that by delivering a "I'm not going anywhere" or "I'm not resigning" speech that it was going to be galvanizing for the fan base? Was it like, did he, in his mind, was it a kind of a Wolf of Wall Street kind of "I'm not leaving" kind of moment? Is that the sort of vibe he thought he was portraying, where it would be this all-inspiring "dear leader" kind of moment? I mean, we've talked in the last few weeks when we had Miguel, author of the very, very soon, if not at the time of listening, already published book, The Greatest, all about Real Madrid. We talked about the character of Perez and how he is pretty much, the most important chairman in the club's history, with the exception of Santiago Bernabeu. However, you could argue that he's probably the most successful. So lots going on there. Interesting. Never a dull moment.
No, it really isn't, and like you say, I like the idea of is this a tactic, or is it a distraction technique or something? Because some of the things he came out with was very scattergun, from saying that there's an orchestrated effort from within the club to undermine him, people, reporting that he's, terminally ill, and then reminding people that he's won 77 titles and he's the greatest president in the club's history. Said there's an effort in the Spanish media to discredit him and Real Madrid. And then, began scrolling through his phone looking for fake news. It comes very much out of the sort of Donald Trump textbook of strongmen, doesn't it? Said he was unhappy with referees,
very
and
Trumpian.
then sort of, extremely. And then even saying, basically, I'm calling an election, which I think was the big surprise, 3 years early, and essentially challenged anybody to dare come up against him. And there was a couple of, nods towards nobody named. The man with the Mexican accent was what was said from time to time, and that's widely believed to be Enrique Riquelme, sort of like a young and up and coming person within the the socio movement and the corridors of power at Real Madrid. But it speaks more volumes for me, Paul, that he came out and spoke about these things, about him, when he's been someone who, over the course of his 23 years, has been quite reserved when it comes to these kind of press conferences. He's had his moments, but he's never really done anything like this before. And it's, the fact that he didn't speak about, the internal struggles in the dressing rooms, the future of a new manager, losing to Barcelona in El Clasico that lost them the title once again. That would be the kind of thing you'd want to hear as a Real Madrid fan, as a reassurance. This was just throwing, a grenade into a bomb factory that was built on top of a volcano. It is insane, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one would suspect that this would be at best ill-advised by anybody who had the the compulsion to try to dissuade him from making such statements. I mean, he touched on everything, didn't he? Super League, squad building, media, women, people from South America, fake news, his personal health, the Negreira case, some wild accusations, obviously, about, was it 7 league titles, which he said he was essentially personally robbed of, in his opinion. His comments about was it ABC? His comments about Marca, as he described them as confusing, and so Marca described it as a confusing and chaotic press conference. But I think was it one of the journalists from Marca as well that he'd sort of pointed a finger at in there, and there was just a lot going on, really, wasn't there? That you kind of think that of all of the things, this is not. None of this is needed. This is creating problems where realistically, at a time for Real Madrid, they need some sort of calm. We've talked about. I mean, we can talk about what's next on the agenda in a second, but with everything that's happened involving the playing staff and the results, this was like the last thing really that you would think of doing as a president, or you would expect from a president. Maybe there's some bigger four-dimensional chess going on, and we're about to find out that this is some sort of masterstroke to deliver something. I don't know, but to me, it seemed very, very Trumpian and very much a somebody needs to sort of maybe have some sort of intervention. I guess I don't know. It was offensive on so many levels as well.
It's indicative of where some of these people are at the moment. I was listening to OTC not too long ago, and they were telling the story about Gianni Infantino, asking for a motorcade in Canada, which was basically the same level as the president of of the United States of America would get, and was actually one above what the Prime Minister of Canada would have. And it's kind of one of these things where, these people that are in charge of these institutions have all of a sudden felt like the power's gone to the head. But the one thing I would say about Florentino Perez is he is a astute person. He saw what was coming ahead of the time, and again, we've noted that maybe this era of Galacticos needs to change for Real Madrid to have growth, because if you are Joan Laporta or Hansi Flick at the moment, you're probably rubbing your hands thinking another La Liga is on its way, because the chaos at Real Madrid is just out there. And we've kind of nodded just to what we're going to add next. Throwing Jose Mourinho potentially into this mix does not feel like a great idea to me, Paul. Or could it be a bit of a masterstroke? I really can't tell which way this is going to go.
So I have thought about this over the last few days, and putting the press conference to one side and just thinking about it purely in the terms of, would Jose Mourinho be the right appointment for Real Madrid at this point in time, given everything else that's going on? And I don't mean to sort of, claim that I am all, intelligent or anything like that, but I've kind of concluded that it is actually possibly the best option available for them, in the sense of, you've got all of these characters in the dressing room, strong personalities, superstars, players who, if we think just like, Vinny Jr. and Mbappe, occupy the same space on the pitch, but are also, the very strong willed and everything. And then obviously you've got the Valverde and Tchouaméni situation, and obviously some of these players may not be there next season, but the vast majority of that squad, because you can't sell everyone in the same window, will be there, and they will need someone to bring them together. And I think when you're dealing with a large room of prominent or loud voices, you kind of need a uniting figure. And what better way of uniting that dressing room than by squashing those egos with an even bigger ego in the manager? That, that's the thing. Mourinho was always kind of like built himself up as being the sort of person who, creates this siege mentality in the dressing room, and he galvanizes his team. And it usually works for about 18 months, where they go on and they win a league title playing 4-2-3-1 with, that's just textbook Mourinho, with the exception, I know some people will point out that in the latter years, his teams have played slightly different system, but the siege mentality has always been there. And you only have to look at the way that Benfica played against Real Madrid in the Champions League last season. But he crafts this, doesn't he? He unites the dressing room against the invisible enemy. The invisible enemy, of course, being all those conspirators in the referees association, in the other teams in the league, and in the media. And the only people you can really trust are the players around you and your fans. That's the way he runs a dressing room. So at Real Madrid now, you're going into a situation where you've got alleged infighting, and you've got clash of personalities, and you've got disagreements, and some people have recently said that perhaps Xabi Alonso kind of will feel a bit vindicated by what's transpired recently. But what better way to try and bring those players together than by giving them one person who is one of the highest profile managers in football, one who certainly knows how to win trophies and has done it before, gets on very, very well at times, not necessarily all the time, with the people around him in the club, but also can unite the dressing room. Maybe in this case, not so much as a siege mentality against the outside world, but it could also be he does that, creates that siege mentality against him, and that could be what drives Madrid forward. So I've concluded that whichever way you look at it, it's going to be fireworks, obviously, but I actually think that this could be a stroke of genius.
No, and you know what? On those references, I probably do agree with you there because we've mentioned it a few times that Real Madrid won't be able to evolve overnight, and I think that's what they tried to do this summer with Xabi Alonso to bring in a new style of thinking, a new way of playing, a new way of trying to approach things, and it just doesn't fit with the model that they have. Again, to refer back to Florentino Perez, to see the success that happens at Barcelona through the relationship that Flick has with not only with Laporta but with Deco as a sporting director. That's across the same as so many clubs where you don't really have that at Real Madrid. Perez is essentially the sporting director as well as the president. So it is always going to be working ever so slightly differently. And to bring in, the self-proclaimed special one, egos don't get bigger than that, do they? And the thing is, whether we like it or not, sort of in a pack mentality, people like Vinny Jr. and Mbappe will look towards like an alpha like that. I think Carlo Ancelotti had that as well, but in a slightly different way. Ancelotti felt like the teacher who was also your mate to me. And that's not discrediting him as a manager. He's an absolutely fantastic manager, but he knew how to handle those egos in the dressing room and then just, sort of allowed the football to happen on the pitch. And if you've got enough talent and if you've got enough star players, you'll naturally win football games anyway. So I think that's what Jose Mourinho will certainly bring to the table. The question I would have about Mourinho is, are they getting the same level of talent, intensity, of what they had previously when Mourinho had his first stint in charge of Real Madrid? The one that Florentino Perez loved so much. Now we've kind of got this more spiky Mourinho, but in kind of like I don't want to say a petulant way, but he's not the arrogant Mourinho that we knew of beforehand. That was the special one. He's more of kind of like I'm Mourinho. I can do. I'm at your club. You're lucky to have me. That's what I think. I certainly got that feeling when he was at Tottenham. I certainly got that feeling when he was at Roma. I think it's been slightly different with Benfica, given his affection for the club and for being back home in Portugal. But are they going to be able to get that Mourinho in Real Madrid? That's the only concern I have.
Yeah, and it's a perfectly valid one, and I think that we won't know until probably 10 games in. Now, I'm going to say something here, which it might sound, a little bit like I'm discrediting Mourinho, but I'm not. What I'm actually trying to do is talk to it or point out the specific quality that he has by explaining that I don't think, and I'm saying this now, if you look back, and obviously we've got the benefit of hindsight, and this podcast thrives on hindsight, doesn't it? However, I think if you look at Mourinho's coaching history, you'll see that his tactics are always really quite primitive in the sense of what you do with the 11 players in and out of possession or from set pieces. But he is, let's not forget, a student of, he was a disciple of Cruyff. He just doesn't play the same way that the other Cruyffian disciples do. He doesn't play. He's kind of the anti-Pep, but he's like that for a reason. And I would say that, and this could be the bit that as people throw in the keyboard or saying offensive things to me on social media, but I don't think he is as tactically brilliant as you would expect someone with as many titles as him to have. And I'm not saying that because, in recent years he's, some people have said, oh well, he's past it and everything like that, or that he's. And I don't think that that's necessarily fair. I think it's just that he falls out with people very, very quickly, and so he's not necessarily given the opportunity to. People have probably just got shorter patience nowadays with him. But the point I'm getting at is all of his success, I don't necessarily think is down to his tactical acumen. Instead, I actually think his brilliance, and I say brilliance in the sense of what he has achieved. I'm not just filling in with platitudes here. His brilliance in how he's reached his achievements has been what he does in terms of the theatre and how he plays the game with a lower G there, in the sense of what he does with the 11 players are pretty basic. You close down when you close down, you park the bus when you're winning, but in the final third, you're quite expressive. The being expressive in the final third is very Cruyffian. The rest of it is, is very antitheses to, he doesn't play it up for the back necessarily, but what he does instead is he looks at the fine margins and he plays against the fine margins, which might be, tactical fouling, or, not so much saying the dark arts, because that would be also disrespectful. But what he does in terms of manipulating situations and creating situations, which in some ways they can be considered high risk, because it might be, to win a penalty, or, contain a team in a certain way that it limits their opportunities. And I think that sort of tactic, as long as you can keep up with the standard of refereeing, which I think it was pretty obvious that he can, because he's got that will be fine. And then he's got superstars at Real Madrid that he can allow, when they get the ball in the final third, to just express themselves, and he won't need to coach that. Instead, what he'll need to do is get them thinking, actually, we're all in this together against, whoever our invisible enemy is, be it the referee, be it the coach, be it the other team. And as long as we do our job of putting up a fight when the opposition's got the ball in our half, we can do what we want when we get something, and we'll show how good we are. And I don't think that goes out of date. And I actually think that it has not been as effective in latter years, where he's gone to, clubs. I mean, he still won the conference with Europa. It was Europa Conference, wasn't it? With
with Roma.
With Roma, so it's not like he's gone without silverware or anything. And don't forget, at Manchester United, he won trophies and finished second to a City team that got 100 points. It's not like he is just falling off the map. I still think they're getting somebody. It's horses for courses. That's the thing.
And that'd be the big part of it. And like you say, Manchester United won trophies. Even at Spurs, he took them to the final, where they would go on to win the trophy. Roma, he's got conference. He's gone an invincible season, I believe, so far at Benfica.
Yeah.
So I know they finished way behind Porto and too many draws, but again, going an invincible season is merit in itself. And I think also as well, and probably the note we'd leave on here, unfinished business is the big thing for Mourinho at Real Madrid, I find.
Yes.
I think he has unfinished business with Real Madrid in the same way that Carlo Ancelotti had unfinished business with Real Madrid. And they go there and they once again prove themselves. And sometimes, people of that caliber, people of that thing, the challenge comes in that scenario. Going to, and this is no disrespect to fans of Tottenham or Roma or Benfica, but going to clubs where, like you say, he thinks you're lucky to have me. I don't think he has that same mentality with Real Madrid, and he'll go there and he could be reinvigorated to go and do, an absolutely great job for them. So it'd be interesting to see, when that announcement is made. Apparently it's in the final throes of negotiation between Perez and Mourinho's people now. I imagine they're probably going to wait until the end of the season to let, Arbeloa Skulkoff back to Castilla, maybe. I'm not too sure, but that'll be a really interesting announcement, and it'll be fascinating to see how Real Madrid get on next season if he has his coach. The next returning figure to Spanish football that we wanted to talk about is one that I actually admire a lot, and there's been some really fantastic stories about him recently, especially in relation to the resurrection of San Fernando, his hometown football club down in Andalusia, and that's Monchi signing for Espanyol as sporting director. Now, you know, we could speak about Monchi until the clouds come home from a nostalgia perspective. What he did in his time at Sevilla made him one of the most sought after and admired sporting directors in world football.
Mm-hmm.
For him to go to Espanyol, though, is a really interesting move as of late, and I can't really put my finger on whether this is a sign of where Monchi is going, or whether this is real ambition from Espanyol to, re-establish themselves as an absolute stalwart in La Liga moving forward.
Well, yeah, let's look at it from context. So, obviously, they announced it on the 11th of May, which 3 days ago from time of recording. They've got two fixtures left in La Liga. They're on a winless run, 18 matches.
One last night though against
Well,
Athletic
they
Club.
were, time of appointment, but yeah, obviously won last night. We can't put that down to Monchi, but what it is what it is he's coming in now to how would you say this now? I guess to kickstart the rebuild, and Monchi's always been very good at doing deals for players. Whilst he was at Sevilla, doing it in a way where you would buy cheap, sell high.
Mm-hmm.
Now that model worked, and as you referenced, this time at Sevilla, we could spend a full podcast episode on the main show doing that.
Maybe we should.
Perhaps, maybe we should. But if you think about where Espanyol are at the moment with the trajectory the club's on, and they've been in and out of La Liga over the course of the last 10 years, down to Segunda, they need some stability, and Monchi could come in. His contract runs till 2029, doesn't it? So he's clearly there to work on a project, which is what the club will need to do in terms of financial situation. I know that there's some talk around the ownership, etc. But he's coming in essentially with a task of replicating the model that he implemented at Sevilla. I would say, get us players that can deliver on the pitch, but get them on the cheap so that we can either bring them in at the right time, but also sell them at the right time, and that we have a good base with which to work with in the squad. And Espanyol, we've covered them before for a Copa del Rey episode, which people should definitely go back and listen to. It's actually one of our most listened to episodes and most liked episodes actually across the various platforms. So if you've not listened to it and you want to hear about Pochettino, Pablo Zabaleta, and various others winning was it 2006?
Yeah.
2006 Copa del Rey.
Copa del Rey.
Then go back and do it. They're a club that is ambitious, and actually for its size, I know some Barcelona fans will dismiss it and say, they're just a small club from Cornellà, but Espanyol are one of the historic clubs in Spanish football, and we would want them to be competitive. So I think it's a real good opportunity for both the club and for Monchi.
Yeah, no, I would agree on that. Like you say, you look at Espanyol, and it often gets forgotten, and they're not in the shadow of Barcelona, so to speak. But it is hard when you've got neighbours of that magnitude. 84 seasons in the Liga. They were one of the founders back in 1929 as well. Only 6 seasons spent outside of the top division. So it gives you the sort of calibre of club they are. And, when Alan Pace and his, I think it's the Velocity Sports Group, which is always an interesting name, obviously also own Burnley Football Club in the Premier League, or soon to be the Championship. They've come in and they said they want to build build on top of the infrastructure that Espanyol already have to become a destination for, players to come to have football and success, and sort of like build the profile of that way up. And I think the thing I always find with Alan Pace and former NFL player JJ Watt as well, let's not forget, is that they, are very much aware of the limitations that they have, and they want to put Espanyol back into that sort of European mix, which is where the movers and shakers tend to be in La Liga at the moment. You look at Real Betis, Celta Vigo, Villarreal as a good example as well, with consistently qualifying for the Champions League and such. There is a world there where if they can get this right, that could easily be Espanyol,
Yeah,
quite easily. And I think it's maybe similar to how we were talking about Mourinho before. There's a bit of an opportunity for redemption here for Monchi because he went to Roma after Sevilla after turning over the best part of £800 million in player sales from Sevilla as well. By the way,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
absolutely insane levels of money. One might ask where it's gone, but that's attributed to him even when he was missing or not at the club and at Roma. His spell with Aston Villa recently as well, alongside Unai Emery, it wasn't quite the same dynamic as buying low and selling high there, but he's built a squad that has taken Aston Villa from sort of like being also rans in the Premier League to the Champions League with Unai Emery. So again,
yeah.
it's a chance of redemption for him here, isn't it?
Absolutely, and these are not small achievements. And obviously, it's a different role being the sporting director to say being the coach. Obviously, and yeah, he's had some points to his career where things haven't necessarily gone the way he would have hoped. I mean, obviously, like you say, his spell at Roma was it came with a high level of expectations, and it didn't work out for him. But at Sevilla it clicked, and if you're a chief executive or an owner of a football club, you want an operator like Monchi who can, purely from a commercial lens as much as a sporting lens, who can do a fantastic job for you if he's given the right opportunities to do it. And you look at the rebuild that Aston Villa have gone under. Obviously, a lot of it is documented in the Rise of the Villains book by Guillaume Balaguer. Again, another episode on the podcast that people should go back and listen to. Where you were lucky enough to speak to Guillaume about his book. So Monchi does have this gift of being able to spot talent, bring them in, and get them to work cohesively within the players around him on unlimited resources, and that's the sort of ideal sporting director for any club to have. So it's let's watch this space. I think it'll come good because I think that Monchi's at this stage of his career where he knows what he's doing and he's learned from his previous mistakes, and obviously he has a point to prove because he's got this reputation as being a fantastic operator, and he'll want to maintain that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suppose that the first job is survival for Espanyol in La Liga. In what is one of the most intense relegation scraps I've ever seen. I mean, nobody wanting to go down going into the final couple of games of the season, which is brilliant to see. But Espanyol very much in that mix at the minute. I suppose to maybe jump to very quickly towards the end of the show to talk about Monchi's old club Sevilla. Some very interesting news coming out this week that Sergio Ramos has agreed to buy Sevilla, which again I always find fascinating that it's Sergio Ramos has defined it as if he's got 400 million in his bank account. He might do, but obviously this is a consortium that's looking to come in and take over Sevilla. Sergio Ramos is sort of like heading it up and potentially going to become the president of it. It is obviously a good thing for Sevilla because they're in this state of flux at the moment, aren't they? Where they're constantly in danger and they've fallen so far off the radar of where they feel they should be, well, certainly where they have been, and it's going to end this sort of like impasse on the first of all the debt that they've got, but also the infighting between the Del Nido family about who's actually running the club. So it feels like it might be good news.
Yeah. So if I'm right in saying it, so is it 511 Capital is this consortium, and it's 400 to 450 million pounds worth of investment for an 80% stake in the club. Which it's almost, I don't know. This is one that's grown from being a rumor to something more concrete, but until it's done, it's hard to really know what to make of it. And I also would question, as you say, not just like where's Ramos with this consortium getting that amount of money from, but what is the long, because we don't know enough about the consortium and their intentions. I've got a bit of trepidation about it. Sevilla are a club. Look, you and I, we've said it many times. You support Malaga, I support Real Mallorca, but we actually do just love Spanish football in general, and we want to see the grand clubs or the grand old clubs, or any club really, be looked after and have good custodians running it, and that's what I think owners need to be, custodians who do genuinely take care and protect the club and not just treat it as a financial asset. So I really do hope that this is good news and a positive move for Sevilla, and that Ramos is doing it with the best of intentions. I have no reason to doubt him. I just also haven't seen enough to feel like this is the dawn of a new era as such. Maybe if it was 100% buyout rather than the 80%, because there's still that left over 20%, which I know some of it is split with like smaller organizations, but I also think that that there's still room for infighting, and I would also like to see Sevilla be ran in the right way. I think there's probably been a little bit of good work that's become undone in the last couple of years, and obviously we've just talked about Monchi, but financially the club isn't in the same level of green that you would expect a club with 7 Europa titles to its name to have, and I think that's down to poor management that it's accumulated such debt. So I want to see Sevilla thrive as a club, because I think the stadium's fantastic. I think their fans are very dedicated and they bring a lot of atmosphere. I want to see them win Europa Leagues. I do want to see that happen. I also want to see them compete alongside Real Betis for Champions League football, etc. I want to see the two Sevilla clubs, because I mean El Gran Derby is so fierce, and we want it to be competitive, and and by the way, just because I want to see Sevilla thrive doesn't mean that I'm choosing Sevilla over Real Betis. It's far from it.
Don't paint those colours.
No. I am definitely staying clear. I just love Spanish football. I want to see all the clubs do well, and also I could never favour anybody over Manuel Pellegrini. Really, could we? It's just not
true. We had to get him mentioned.
And there we go. There's the klaxon. There's the Pellegrini klaxon. You think we get an episode without mentioning him? Right.
No, absolutely. Well, and rightly so as well, because I think I saw a very interesting tweet on Twitter the other day, which said first manager of 4 different Spanish football clubs to qualify for the Champions League with 4 different clubs, which again is just an absolute, massive achievement for Manuel Pellegrini. But I also agree with you as well, to see a competitive Sevilla alongside a very competitive Real Betis is only going to be good for Spanish football. Like I say, will this be the new dawn that it's going to be badged at? It remains to be seen, but we'll definitely keep an eye on it with interest, because I imagine over the summer that's going to be a huge moving target that we can keep an eye on. We'll quickly just wrap up then, Paul, with the end of this pilot episode. I want to give you sort of like an opportunity to potentially point towards a game you think we should be watching this weekend. I'm going to assume that there's a great game down towards the bottom of the Liga, potentially involving your own club, that is definitely going to be worth a watch.
Well, yeah, it's Mallorca versus Levante, isn't it? Which is huge. But then, to tell you the truth, where you look at that table, and if you could pick whichever the game involves a bottom club, who knows what the result's going to be? It is such a wild. You posted on our Twitter feed this morning, I think it was. From 8th down to 20th, or down to 19th, because obviously we already had one club relegated, are still in the relegation fight, and that's why we love La Liga, isn't it?
Oh, it's crazy, and the fact that you've got a club who've never been relegated from La Liga in there, the current Copa del Rey champions, a club who's in a Europa Conference League final. It's spectacular down there, and obviously all the games in the last 2 weekends of this regular season as well, all being played at the same time, which adds a extra bit of trepidation in there too. So definitely worth catching any game that's involving a club that's involved in that mire. I'm going to point you towards a Friday night football game, because I do like Friday night under lights. If you haven't been watching Cordoba in the last few few weeks. They are absolutely on fire. They've won 6 in a row. They are just outside the playoffs at the minute, only 5 points behind Castellon in that 6th spot. And they host Albacete on Friday night. Another win would really do, themselves the good in terms of catching up to the rest of the playoff picture. And if they can get, 3 wins out of 3 in the last remaining games, we could be talking about Cordoba coming out absolutely nowhere to get themselves into the Spanish Segunda promotion race, which, again, we talk about how tight it is at the bottom of La Liga to basically stay in La Liga. The fight to get into La Liga from the Spanish Segunda and in that top sort of 8 clubs is also absolutely huge as well. So definitely worth catching a game this weekend in the Spanish Segunda. Paul, the pilot for me has been absolutely exemplary. I've really enjoyed this chat. It's been really funky to take off our nostalgia hats for once and breathe the fresh air of modern football potentially. Have you had fun?
I have, yes, I have, and I hope the listener has as well. And even if they haven't, I still want to hear from him to let us know feedback. We'll obviously be back on the next episode. Will be nostalgia based, and probably the one after that, and one after that, and one after that. But we will, if everybody likes this, we'll do more of these. It's it's because we want to put out this extra content for you, and we want to give you more offerings and plenty of things to not only get you to like and subscribe, but maybe consider joining us over on Patreon as well, where you get lots of things like early and ad free. Sometimes as well, you might get Super Sebasta. Sometimes you might get the El Partido Revista, the magazine. Sometimes you might just get a voice note from me talking about how the retro weekend went. We get lots of things, and you know what? Let's just do our part. If you leave us a like or a review or whatever, 5 stars preferably, but I'll accept a 1 star as well. As long as you leave something, then that'll all help. But better still, just tell your friends that this podcast exists, because we're doing quite well. We're getting 1,000 or so listens a month, and I'd like to get it to 2,000, and there we go.
Ambitious aims from Paul there, definitely. So, and like I reiterate, we'd love to hear your feedback on this. Let us know if you've enjoyed this kind of episode from us, because we do like to talk about this kind of stuff from time to time as well. But for now, I'll say thank you very much to you, Paul, for joining me this evening.
Thanks to you, Nick. It's been a pleasure.
As always. And thank you very much to you guys at home once again. Go and give all our other episodes a listen to as well. You'll be thoroughly enjoyed. We've got some fantastic interviews coming up soon as well as we spiral towards the end of the regular football season. But for now, I'll catch you then. Hasta luego.